What's up, everybody? Bears over beers tonight, presented by Second City Gridiron. Thankfully, the 2024 season is over, and thankfully, I remembered to hit live stream this time. This is the second time we've done the intro to this show. My good friend here, Jacob Infante, pointed out to me that, Ryan, you forgot to hit go live. So here we are, Ryan Drosty, Jacob Infante, here to break down the end of the season, to talk about the Bears head coaching search, to talk about Jacob's experience at Lambeau Field for the second time tonight. Jacob, how are you doing?
I'm doing great for the second time tonight. I'm slowly entering that phase where it's like, okay, it's off season mode. My brain's starting to swirl with ideas and delusions that maybe the Bears will be better next year. It's my favorite part of the year because you don't have to be faced with the cold, hard truth that the team isn't very good. So, especially though, coming off of an upset win over Green Bay. I mean, I can't be mad at that. I don't think anybody should be. I know some people were complaining a little bit. It's like, oh, this has dropped us down a couple spots in the draft order. I tweeted something along the lines of, when you're thinking about this game 20 years from now, you're not going to think, oh, the Bears went from the number 7 overall pick or the number 8 overall pick to number 10. Like, no one's going to remember that. People are going to remember the Bears finished off their season. Caleb Williams, in his rookie year, in his first game at Lambeau Field, they beat the Packers. And that's the first time they've done that in 10 years. So I'm doing pretty good, all things considered.
Undefeated at Green Bay, Caleb Williams. How can you not love it? How can you not celebrate it? No, it was a great way for the season to end. I was not one of those people rooting for a loss. It's Green Bay. We haven't beat them since 2018. Haven't beat them in Green Bay since Jay Cutler on Thanksgiving night 2015. How could you not want to win the game? And man, I can't believe you were there. I was stunned when I saw your tweets coming across my screen that you were there in the cold and everything. And I want to hear how it all came about. We're going to get to that. But before that, Jacob, we got a little business to take care of. And that is, what are we drinking tonight? So we talked about this a little bit last night. Are you drinking anything?
So tonight I am not. Here's the reason why. So for full disclosure, I'm in a league with some guys I went to college with, a fantasy football league. And this year my team came in last place. So as my punishment, I have to run a beer mile this week. So I'm not looking forward to that. I think it's something like 4 beers in 1 mile. So, and knowing me, I don't have an amazing tolerance. So I'm probably going to be sloshed pretty quickly after that. So I thought, hey, I might as well save my beers for whenever I have to do that run of shame. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be drinking tonight. But I mean, I feel like me sober is mentally unwell enough that I can fake being drunk. So I suppose I'll do just fine.
That's incredible. Well, did you drink anything at Lambeau Field?
I did, yeah. I had, because I know Miller's big up there, so obviously I had to have a Miller Lite. I had a couple of those. I didn't go too crazy, but it definitely enough to, take the edge off a little bit. So, I feel like you're in Wisconsin. That's like it's a rite of passage. You got to be up, drinking Miller. I couldn't see any spotted cow though. So I was a little disappointed by that. I was going to try and get some, but didn't come across any. So I'm curious now. I got to find out if you got anything, what are you drinking?
I am. It's not a particularly rare beer, though, not to disappoint you. I'm a little low on stock right now, to be honest with you, but it's a Guinness. It always goes well on these cold Midwestern nights. It's hovering around 0 degrees wind chill outside right now, although I do believe you probably actually have snow on the ground, don't you?
Yeah, so when I was gone, I was in Chicago for the holidays. St. Louis got hit with a massive snowstorm just a couple days ago, so for my real job, I've been working, like I'm in St. Louis again, but I've been working remote for the whole week. When I pulled in, it was probably like 7-8 inches of snow. I had to go and shovel and, dig out a spot in a parking lot and everything. So it wasn't fun at all. So I don't know if you got, I don't know if there's any snow up by you, but I know here it's pretty brutal. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, it's been a strange winter here. I'm in northeastern Iowa, and
Yeah.
we haven't got hit at all. That big storm went right underneath us, and
Mm.
I've had like a dusting of snow this year, but there's like nothing in the forecast at all, and nothing on the ground now. But
Yeah.
it is very chilly, and on cold nights, I like stouts, I like porters. So let me get this poured here. Nice little Guinness. Oh yes, always goes well. Great beer for a cold night in January, that's for sure. So as I pour this and I begin enjoying this fine dark beer that you guys are all seeing on the live stream right now, maybe, yeah, look at that bubbling up. There's
Oh,
your Guinness for you. Oh yeah, look at that
you
shot.
got the Guinness glass and everything too. Oh,
Oh
look at
yeah.
that's a thing of beauty.
And I got to give the shout out to Mrs. Drosty on that, because my wife actually brought this Guinness glass back, I believe, from Europe. So that's the one beer glass that I did not donate to the family cupboard. So thank you to the wife for that. But yeah, let's hear it. How did you end up going to Lambeau Field last weekend? How did this come about? How long have you been planning this trip? And then what was the game day experience like?
Yeah, so I mean, it was pretty. I mean, I don't want to say last minute. Within like the last month or so, we like my dad reached out to me. He's like, "Hey, would you be interested in going to the Bears Packers game in Lambeau?" And I'm like, I'd never been to Lambeau before. So my younger brother, he's still in college right now. He goes to St. Norbert College, which is up in De Pere, Wisconsin, which is like 15 minutes away from Green Bay. So he's up there. All of his college buddies are up there. We wanted to make like a little weekend trip of it. So gladly I came along. Didn't realize going into it was going to be so cold, but I layered the hell up. I got all my hand warmers, my giant gloves, the double socks, sweatpants under the jeans, all the good Midwestern tricks to deal with the cold. And once I got there, actually, I think, the fact that it was so many people huddled up, like pretty close together, it wasn't as bad. Or maybe it was just the seats. Like I wasn't exposed to too much of the weather because I was in like the 300s, which was right underneath the box seats. So I didn't get too much wind. But tailgating, it was pretty tough. We got, hit by all the wind and everything. And I didn't have like anything covering my face. So I was damn near frozen the entire time. But it was, okay, first I should say, have you ever been to Lambeau?
I have not.
I highly recommend it. I think this was my first time there, my first time going to a Bears away game ever, and which itself was a cool experience. But I think Lambeau especially, it's an experience unlike anything else. I think that literally we didn't park in a parking lot. We parked in someone's front yard, like on their grass. They charged us like, I think it was like $30 or something for parking near the stadium. And they just had like tailgating out in people's front yards. Cause it's literally, they say it's the stadium, like in the middle of a neighborhood. Like there are houses and, like residential areas and stuff nearby. And, there's Titletown and everything too. But the fans were surprisingly hospitable. I wasn't expecting that. Cause it's like, oh, Bears, Packers, Bears fans, like they're pretty brutal when Green Bay comes to town. The Green Bay folk were pretty nice to me. I only had one guy give me a smart ass comment. He said something like, "Oh, it's like great game, Caleb. I can't wait the next one. Oh wait," or something like that. But because he's not making the playoffs this year, but everyone else was pretty polite, honestly. I was pleasantly surprised with my experience there, and just being at Lambeau, given the history and how long it's been around, was impressive. It made me think I really want the Bears to move to Arlington Heights. Seeing that kind of environment with, parking wasn't an issue, traffic wasn't much of an issue. It had like this unique feel to it. It's like a real community thing. So. I'm never going to like the Packers. I'm never going to root for the Packers. I hate their stinking guts, but I mean, God, like it was a fun time. I mean, I'm not going to lie. It was pretty sick to experience. So definitely recommend. It's a little bit of a drive, and there's not too much else to do in Green Bay other than, go to some of the local bars and, drink the night away, which is fun. But yeah, I mean, definitely recommend going there. So huge, big fan. I'm a fan of Green Bay, not a fan of the Packers. I'll put it like that.
Was there any difference in interaction with the Green Bay fans before the game and after the game?
I mean, a little bit. The one smart ass dude who reached out, who talked to me, was after the game. So I don't know. I think at that point, like, Washington had already won their game, so it wasn't going to matter if the Packers, won or lost anyway, because their seeding wasn't going to change. I don't know. I thought they were in pretty good spirits for a last second heartbreaking loss. I know I'd be inconsolable if the Bears lost like that. I remember I was when they lost to the Packers after the missed field goal. So,
yeah.
But no, they were pretty polite. Like, I think we had to have like a little bit of a humility. Me and my family were like, oh, it's like, this is the first time in like 6 years. It might be another 6 years before this happens. We got to enjoy it while we still can, whatever, play that up that whole bit. But no, they were cool with me. So I'm, very grateful for that. Kind of surprised, but I will, I'll take that 100%. And nobody punched me in the face, so I'm pretty happy with that, honestly.
You're way too nice of a guy to punch in the face, Jacob. Couldn't happen.
You'd be surprised. There some people are not fans of me, but I do what I can.
You give it a few years. You go back up there in a few years after Caleb and the Bears run off a few more wins on them, and then they might get a little bit more inhospitable. I think they've been dominating the series for so long that they're all good natured right now. But if we turn the tables on them, I think it might be a little bit different.
Yeah, so, I mean, because we're little brother to them now. We have had our asses handed to us for the better part of the last decade and a half, whatever. So yeah, I mean, if I were in their shoes, I wouldn't see us as much of a threat. So, they could pick, it's like, oh, little brother picks up a win every 5 or so years. Fine, whatever. Yeah. It doesn't matter much in the grand scheme of things. We're going to the playoffs. You guys are having a top 10 pick, but it was fun. It was fun. I'm glad they won. I'm glad I got to go to it. So it's, I don't think anybody lost, honestly. I think it was a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, the whole little brother thing and all that. We talked about this on the pod last week. So Brian, my other co-host, Orange Chuck, he actually was picking the Bears to win, and I was like, man, this guy's so positive on the Bears. And we had Greg Braggs on with us last week from CHGO, and we were kind of like, I just can't pick the Bears to beat the Packers until they show me that they can beat them. And after this game, after earlier this year when we should have beat them. Possibly an illegal block on that kick, by the way. I mean, that block kick away from, the Bears sweeping Green Bay this year. I don't know. Maybe I'll be brave and pick them next year, depending on our coaching hire, which, we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But I would like to get to Green Bay and see a game there. I've kind of, much like US Bank, I haven't been to a game at US Bank yet, and that's only like a 3-hour drive for me. But I've told my Vikings fan friends and I've told my Packers fan friends, I'm not going till the Bears are competitive, and then I'll go. So, I don't want to be embarrassed. I told the story last week on the pod that I went to a wedding in Manitowoc, which is like an hour south of Green Bay. And I thought about going up there and checking out the, the museum and everything. This was in the summertime. This is like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Man, they were not that kind to me, Jacob. I got hassled that whole weekend. They had the rehearsal dinner at the sports bar, and everyone was giving me crap. They were playing the Bears still stuck on the jukebox. I mean, everything. It was not good. I did not have the experience you did. So I vowed that weekend in 2009 I would not return until I was sure the Bears would kick some Packer ass. So maybe in the coming years. But I have seen the Bears on the road, though. I've seen them in the old St. Louis Rams, and I saw them play in New York against the Giants many years ago. So
was that like at MetLife, or was that the Meadowlands?
So it was at MetLife. It was, I believe, the first year it was open. It was 2010. It was the Sunday night game where Cutler got sacked like 9 times and left the game. Yeah, I was at that game in like the second row. One of my good buddies was working for the Giants as a trainer, and my now wife and I had been dating like 2 months. And so we flew out for the game. You know, I'm trying to impress her and everything. We're going to New York City. The game was, I mean, it was just miserable. It drizzled the whole time. You know, after the game, I went in the Giants facility wearing my Devin Hester jersey to meet up with my friend, and I was humiliated. It was quite the experience. But yeah, I don't know. I don't mind seeing them on the road. I've been thinking about going to the game in Las Vegas next year, so we'll see.
That would be pretty sick. I think, I mean, I've never even been to Vegas, let alone that stadium, but I think that like that experience would be really cool just because like the way it comes off on TV, like that's one of my favorite stadiums like in the league. And I mean, it's one of the newer ones, so it's got the advantage, whatever, but I think it looks pretty sick. So if you make that trip, I'd definitely be interested to hear about that.
We should do it up. You should come with.
Oh,
Windy City Gridiron trip, man.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
You never been to Vegas? I'll teach you how to do it right.
Yeah, I figured my first time for that, you know, I gotta do it proper. Someone's got to show me the ropes. So you know, if you want to be that guy, by all means, I'd love that.
I am that guy. I will be that guy. I promise.
Thank you.
Yeah, we have got to talk about this as the months go on. I mean, it's going to depend when the game is a little bit for me, but if it's at a good time to travel, I'm definitely considering it. So that's the 2025 Bears, though. Let's talk 2024 Bears. So, you know, the game has been dissected to death. I'm sure people mostly want to hear us talk about the coaching search. Do you have any closing thoughts on that, and then just the season in general? Did you want to hit tonight? Anything on the top of your mind right now?
I mean, not too much, honestly. I feel like a lot of what can be said about this year has been said already. I think that it's a lot of what the future is going to hold is going to depend on who the head coach is going to be. And I just think it's nice to end this season on a win because the season's been so deflating. These, you know, especially these last few months with this, you know, the 10-game losing streak and everything. So just to end it on a win it's a victory, but it's also a moral victory. And I really don't like the thought of a moral victory in the NFL, but you know, they do exist. And I think this was one of them, you know, for the players, for the organization, for the fan base. It's like, okay, we just beat Green Bay and didn't even play all that well. Like the offense didn't look great. There were a couple splashes here and there, but the consistency was bad. The play calling wasn't good. The run game was kind of weak. But, you know, the defense showed up, you know, forcing turnovers, the punt return for a touchdown. It's encouraging. There's stuff to build off of in the next year. And when you see how much cap space they have, when you see, okay, Caleb Williams he's going to have his first full offseason in an NFL program, potentially with a renowned offensive head coach, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But either way, and you have 2 second-round picks and a top 10 pick in this year's draft. I mean, there's a lot to be excited about. So I'll take the win knowing it dropped like 2 or 3 spots in the draft order any day. I'll take that any day of the week.
Yeah. Get to a couple chats here from Twitter X. We got Matthews in the chat. Anytime the Bears beat the Packers, it's a major W. I don't care if it meant we dropped in the draft order. Well said. I mean, This has been the monkey on the Bears' back for so long. And I think there's something to be said just going into next year for the guys that are going to be around, not only to get the win against Green Bay, but to get it literally in Green Bay and, to follow up in that heartbreaker when we played them earlier at Soldier Field this year, to come out and to actually, get ourselves in field goal range at the end in less than a minute to make that drive, to make the kick, to do it all with the time ticking down for Caleb to clock it just in time for them to get the kickoff. So many of the problems that we had down the stretch, Nicholas mentioned in the chat here, so many were 1-score games. I mean, how many times do we see a rookie Caleb Williams put him into position this year? The Green Bay game, the go-ahead, what we thought was the go-ahead in the Washington game, to bring him back in crunch time against Minnesota, to take him down the field on Thanksgiving, and all those times where we're thinking as fans, it's no doubt about it. It's been frustrating this year for all the good rookie quarterbacks. And, we're watching Caleb week to week. A lot of other people, they're just watching the stat sheets. And, not that his stats are bad, but, people are seeing the losses and they're like, oh, what a bust. But we know watching him, he's nothing close to a bust. And all of the times he's put our team in position to win and they haven't closed it out where, you would have seen the headlines the next day, Caleb Williams, game-winning drive, multiple times this year. And he didn't get any of those. And that was so frustrating. So for him too, to have the game-winning drive in his first game against the Packers at Lambeau. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat, one of the most disappointing Bears seasons of my life, top 5 for sure. No question about it. But at least to give us something good to chomp on as we go into the off season, that was a great way to end the season. No question about it.
Yeah. And I think, so that's an interesting point. Now I'm starting to think, like, what are the most disappointing Bears seasons in recent memory? Like, I'm starting to think about it. This year obviously stands out. I think you have to go back to 2019, coming back from they just won the NFC North, only to go back and just miss the playoffs entirely that next year. And then 2014, the Trestman year, where it's like, the offense looks really good. We spent a lot in free agency. Nothing came of that. I think this was not the worst Bears season, just because some of those, I feel like the games have been definitely closer this time around than they were in, say 2014. And but it's, I don't know, definitely been frustrating seeing a lot of these 1-score games, a lot of it coming down to the defense. And I don't want to sit here and be like, oh, Caleb was perfect, he looked like a top 10 quarterback as a rookie. That wasn't the case. You still got room to improve, and, he should improve. He needs to improve. But I think that there is enough from him where you can feel comfortable working with him going forward. It's like, all right, he showed good poise late in the fourth quarter. He was really good. I mean, a little bit of a slow starter, but the fourth quarter, over the course of the season, he played very good football. And say that, whatever garbage time, whatever the case may be, but a lot of those games were pretty close. So I think he deserves credit for that, for the arm talent, the athleticism, the creativity that shows up. Now it's just building off that. That's really what this offseason is going to focus on. And I know we'll, dig into that too, but I think, that's definitely what, we're going to be looking for here in the offseason.
Yeah. A couple of weeks ago, actually it's probably a little bit longer than that, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago on the show. So Brian and I, we kind of ranked our most disappointing Bears seasons. And to me, I think 2019 is it for me, because I really did believe, we're coming off the double doink, but it seemed like, we had a young team, great year in 18. So many in the media, not just in Chicago, were picking us to be a Super Bowl contender that year. And then the way that played out, that's maybe the most disappointing Bears season of my life. There's other ones where, like, there was other factors that played into it, like 07 coming off the Super Bowl. Obviously my expectations were really high, but then there was a ton of injuries that year to the team. So, and that kind of kept happening with, the Lovey defense prime years, a lot of injuries in 07, in 09, in 2011, all those years had lots of injuries. 2012 was obviously disappointing to not get into the playoffs, but we had a winning year. So, like, the whole year wasn't disappointing in a way that, like, 19 was for me. 02 was really disappointing too, coming off of 01, and they went like 4-12, I think, in 2002. Had some injuries that year too, but that was pretty disappointing. I think it was I mentioned this on the show. I think it was the 96 Bears. I think 95, they had gone to the playoffs. I think that was the year they beat Minnesota. And then they started off 96. They played, I think it was Monday Night Football against the Cowboys, and they beat them, and the Cowboys had just won the Super Bowl. So my expectations were really high. Like, we had a playoff year. We just beat the world champs. And then, that season was terrible. So that was a pretty disappointing one too. But no, there's been a lot of them. But this one, certainly not as much as 19 to me, because I thought we were a Super Bowl contender. But, like, I did think we would compete for the wild card, and most of our staff did it at WCG. And I don't think there was any reason to not think that. Given the trajectory of the team at the end of the year, I think, to me, one of the biggest disappointments this year was not the offense, even though it was horrible, but it was the defense, because we all thought, top 10 unit across the board in so many categories. and they looked like they could stop nobody at times this year. I mean, to me, that was the biggest fall off. I knew there was going to be issues on offense. With we all thought the O-line was a little sketchy going into the season. I felt they could hold it together enough, and then we had a lot of injuries there too.
Yeah.
I said on the show we did here on Second City Gridiron, where like all the staff was coming in rotations with Lester and JB.
Yeah.
I remember that night I said, Caleb's going to have his rookie moments. And some guy in the chat was like murdering me. He's like, what do you mean he's going to have rookie moments? I'm like, dude, of course he is.
He's a rookie.
I didn't think that the offense was going to be a top 10 offense, but I thought they'd be good enough with that defense from what we saw last year to win 10 games. And look, if you switch a few of these 1-score games, it would have won 10 games. So it was disappointing, but not to the level of 19 for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair when you consider how high the expectations were. I mean, because like looking at that 2019 season, I mean, they lost. It was Amos and Callahan were the two big ones, and they replaced they still in theory decent replacements. HaHa Clinton Dixon, Buster Screen. The running back, you went from Jordan Howard to Dave Montgomery, and then you added Mike Davis, and you already had Tariq Cohen. So, and it's like, oh, in theory, Mitch Trubisky should be better in year 3 than he is in year 2. He wasn't. And a lot of things just fell apart. And yeah, so I'd say this 2024 season falls behind those, but I'd put it third. I'd put it third behind 2019, then 2014. And then probably 2007, just because, such a drop off from Super Bowl to not making the playoffs. I mean, even with the injuries, stuff that's tough to control. But yeah, it's definitely up there. So I'm glad I'm glad that this is all behind us now. We don't have to dwell in the misery of, oh God, these guys suck. But you can look to the future, which it's like there's a little bit to be excited about. There's work that needs to be done for sure, but there's something at least.
Yeah, let's talk about the coaching search as we look ahead here to the 2025 season. And by the way, Bears Over Beers is going to be with you in the off season, not every week like we've had during the season, but if you guys are fans of our show along with all the other shows here on the channel, just subscribe to the podcast feed, to the YouTube channel, and stay tuned because we're planning on checking in about once a month here in the off season. Of course, like when big things happen. So whatever week they hire the head coach, we'll probably do a show that week, around free agency, the draft, that kind of thing. So we're still going to be checking in with you. It just won't be as often as during the season when we had so many games to discuss. But that coaching hire is going to be the big one since we're not getting a new GM. Jacob, maybe we should start there. Ryan Poles is likely going to be getting an extension. I mean, I can't imagine if he hasn't already. I know there's rumors out there about his status, and he wouldn't address it in the press conference yesterday. But I mean, how do you feel about the Ryan Poles situation? Did you feel that he should be let go? Are you fine with him staying around? Where do you come in on that?
I mean, like, I get it. I get having the argument of you can keep Ryan Poles because I feel like the roster itself is a lot more talented than what he inherited. And it's in a lot better space for the future than it was from what he inherited. I also think that the lack of improvement along the offensive line, the lack of significant investment on a consistent basis has been frustrating. When it's very clearly been an issue the last couple of years, and it's still an issue in 2025. That part of it's not great. I think you're looking at it from the last 3 years. Your best season is 7 wins. I know. 2022 was it was a tanking team. It was a total rebuild year. No one expected that team to be good. No one should have, at least anyway. But also adding on to that, also a lot of those losses came down to coaching. It's not necessarily the way the roster was built. It's more or less the way that Eberflus managed it. So, if you do want to believe it, it's like, okay, Ryan Poles was given 3 guys from Bill Polian's search and said, pick from one of these 3. If that's true, then, there's only so much you can blame Poles on that for. And if that is the case, then I do believe he deserves a chance to pick his own guy, which it looks like he's going to. I don't feel great. I feel like this Bears team should have done a lot better this year than it actually did. And with all the money, they still have a lot of cap space, but they've spent a decent amount of money the last couple of years. And look, at some of the big swings. I mean, DeAndre Swift is getting paid big money for a running back. He was just okay this year. Tremaine Edmonds is getting paid massive money for an off-ball linebacker. He hasn't been very good. The Chase Claypool trade looms insanely large because that was just terrible. The Chase Claypool trade. I can go on and on about how that's one of the worst trades in Bears history, in my opinion. But me personally, I would have fired Poles this offseason. I just think that the opportunity to sync up the GM and the head coach made a lot of sense. Similar to, firing Eberflus last year, where you get to sync up a new head coach with a new quarterback. They had the opportunity to do that and they didn't. They had the opportunity to sync up the head coach and the GM. They didn't. So I don't know necessarily how to feel about it. I guess there's nothing necessarily that there's nothing I can do about it. That's for sure. So I just have to sit back and, hope for the best. I think that the Bears head coaching gig is a lot more attractive now than it was in 2022 when they ended up signing Eberflus, which I think is encouraging for sure. So it's just a matter of wait and see.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I said last week, and I think the other guys were with me too, that I was on board with firing him just because of the results. I do think a lot of it is about coaching, of course. They should have been able to squeak out some more wins this year. Bare minimum, they should have equaled 7 and probably more.
Yeah.
And a lot of that is on coaching and development. And my God, this Chris Morgan, horrible offensive line coach. I don't know how he has stuck around as long as he has. That's about to change. But I do think the results of, like you mentioned, a lot of the missteps, and some of that you can hold against him. The problem to me is that 3 years to build a serviceable offensive line is not too much of an ask, especially for a guy who played offensive line. You would think he would prioritize that. And, I know he had the comments in the press conference about how, it kind of goes with how it lines up with the picks and who's available and everything. But I mean, there were good linemen picked after some of their picks that they just whiffed on. So, I mean, they could have addressed it more in the draft. I'm sure they're going to really address it this offseason. They're probably going to end up overpaying a bit, but hopefully they get it shored up. If they can get a couple of good free agents in here and then some heavy draft capital, it'll go a long ways. Of course, we still need help on the D line too. I mean, these were all of us, the football analyst fans, we all knew these were concerns going into the season, and I'm sure he knew that too. But I mean, the quotes from him are pretty damning now when he talked about the depth on the O-line, and we just saw one of the worst offensive line performances in Bears history this year. I mean, that's real bad. I mean, it doesn't take 3 years to flip a team in the NFL and make them competitive. Like by year 3, you should be doing that if you're a good GM. So they're going to extend them because you have to. Like otherwise, you're not going to get a good coach in here. And we've seen the reports that supposedly Ben Johnson is all right with working with Ryan Poles, and if that's the case, they're going to extend him. That's what they have to do. And I would hope whoever the coach that comes in, has a good amount of roster control as well and say on what they're doing along with Poles. Yeah. And I mean, that's definitely going to be a demand. But maybe he gets a bit of a harsh grade from people where, like it was the coaches failing him too. But I mean, there's clearly a talent deficit on this team, and he's swung and missed quite a bit too.
Yeah. And I think it's going back to the offensive line piece. I mean, I think Darnell Wright has proven to be a good pick at 10th overall. I think he's lived up to expectations so far, had, improved significantly in year 2, which I feel good about. I think Braxton Jones was a really good get in round 5. Like I don't think enough people, understand to get a starting caliber tackle in round 5 from an FCS school. I mean, that doesn't happen very often. So I think Poles
Mm-hmm.
deserves credit for that. But I wonder if he saw that and went like, oh, okay, I don't need to invest significant money or significant capital in the offensive line as often. I trust my evaluation processes. I can find some diamonds in the rough, spend money at other positions. And then that's how you end up with Lucas Patrick starting. That's how you end up with, look, I know Coleman Shelton graded out fairly well from a PFF perspective. I know center play around the league has been down this year. I don't think he's a long-term guy. That's how you end up paying $10 million a year to Nate Davis when it's abundantly clear from multiple reports that he wasn't well liked in the Titans organization. He didn't try. He didn't practice. And then, lo and behold, he never practiced with the Bears and he didn't play well with the Bears. So it's a little bit frustrating for sure, but I have some faith in that the answer is so it's comically clear. Like it's screaming at him. Invest in the offensive line. You've messed up several times this, over the years. You're getting another chance. This is what you need to do. Like it's so clear. And if he can't see that, then he shouldn't be anywhere near an NFL general manager role. So we'll see. There's only so much we can, say declaratively until we see how free agency turns out, what they do at the draft, whatever the case may be. But I think that I think, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting, different results. So I think Ryan Poles would be insane if he doesn't invest heavily in the offensive line this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at his draft history, I mean, the third round has been his kryptonite. I mean, I think when you look at his picks in the first two rounds, I know people talk about whether he should have gone with Rome or not. I still don't have any problem with him going at Rome, despite what we saw happen here on the offensive and defensive lines, because I think especially when Keenan's out of here, he already shined even when he didn't get the ball. If you watch the tape, with his separation and his route running, I mean, the dude's going to be a star. I have no problem with him picking Rome. Yeah. And, you mentioned Darnell Wright, a first round pick. He's a solid pick. Dexter has flashed, he looks like he's going to be decent. I mean, Tyreek, well, he sure fell off. Maybe a new coach can kind of help turn around his career, but he's played solid at times. And then, you go back to Pole's first draft, Kyler Gordon, Brisker. I mean, these were solid picks. It's the third round. It's Valus. It's Zachary Pickens. It's Kyron. I mean, that's where he's really fallen up. I mean, you mentioned some of those hits late too, where you can look at it positively. I think Terrell Smith in the fifth round, I think he's been really, really good. I've talked about this in my game ball columns over on Windy City Gridiron that, I'd like to see him playing over Stevenson. He's looked solid, every time he's out there. Hicks in the seventh round in his first draft, he hit on him. He's been pretty solid at safety.
Oh yeah.
So I mean, we can argue about the positions he picked and when, but he certainly found some diamonds in the rough. And maybe Brian Orenchuk's positivity is rubbing off on me, but I do not think this team is as far away as some in the media would have you believe. I listen to a lot of the sports talk and the different podcasts, and I mean, some of these guys are like, "Oh no, we're years away from competing." It's like, I don't think that. Maybe I'm a homer, but I think they shore up these lines and they have the ability to do that with cap space and draft capital. You get a new coach in here, winning these games they should have won this year. I don't think it's out of the possibility they could be a playoff team next year at all.
No, I'm with you there. I think that there's a lot of talent on this roster, and if you look at it, they're a rare mishap on a Hail Mary and a field goal away from being 7-10, which still isn't great, but it shows they're very close in a handful of these games. And I think that's encouraging. Even I think a lot of it comes down to, bad coaching decisions. Some of those losses with good coaching, realistically, this is a team that's pushing 500. but it just so happened that it was one of the most comically mismanaged seasons in recent Bears history. Uh, but yeah, and I think that Poles has done a decent job drafting. I think there's a lack of I don't know. There's a lack of blue chippers on the roster, but I think there are guys who have potential to be. I think Darnell Wright could be one of those guys. Caleb obviously could be. I think Rome could be. I'm on the same track with you. I think he's going to be really good next year. Uh, but that third round, man, it's tough because that's where you can find solid starters. Like I don't think the expectation should be, oh, it's the third round, you're going to get all pros every single time. But you
Mm-hmm.
can get guys who are going to contribute, who are going to be decent starters, who can eventually work their way into a second contract. The way you're looking at it now, Velus Jones is on his third NFL team already. I thought that was a flawed pick from the beginning.
Yep.
Zach Pickens, I kind of understood. I thought it was a reach because he was pretty raw, but again, still, it's a lengthy, athletic defensive tackle. Maybe he develops into something. He hasn't. I mean, he was a healthy scratch for a couple games to close out the year. And then Amagaji, I'll speak to that. Look, I don't think that he was a reach in the third round. I think judging off of the upside and the tape that he showed at Yale and the measurables that he has, I think that was pretty fair. It's just that for a team that needs immediate offensive line help, can you afford to draft a guy who's very clearly a prospect, who's very clearly a developmental project? You know, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's the big thing is I do think Amagaji could develop into something, but it was pretty clear to anybody who watched him that he wasn't going to be a valuable starter right out of the gate. He wasn't going to be.
No.
I wouldn't even argue he was going to be good out of the gate, and he certainly struggled as a rookie. But I don't know. I think he's got the wingspan, he's got the athleticism, he's a strong player. I think there's really, there's upside with him, and with him being healthy now, having a full NFL offseason to work with, I expect him to get better, but again, is that really the right pick for what the Bears needed at that time? I don't think so. So time will tell. Time will tell. Early returns aren't great, but I don't want to, I don't want to hate on Amagaji too much because I think there so much of it was he got dealt a bad hand with the injury and, him being a small school guy and all that. Just the expectations were too high. But yeah, overall, the third round, that's looking like a major blemish on Ryan Poles' record. So I'm with you there 100%.
Yeah, Luke said it in the chat. Nailing rounds 3, 4, 5 is what sets franchises apart. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Luke. And that was the problem with Amagaji is just him being a project player for a team that had such strong needs at O-line to go there in the third round. If you're a team with a strong offensive line and you can really bring this guy along and you think he's going to develop into a really solid player, that's one thing. But the Bears had the cupboard was bare.
Yeah.
Here, no pun intended. It was bad. And so for them to go with a pick like that, it was mentioned in the chat too. In 3 years, he's drafted 2 punters. Yeah, that's a little bit alarming too. Like I didn't mind the Torrey Taylor pick because look, I'm a Hawkeyes fan. The dude is an incredible punter. But I can see how you look at that now and you're like, man, what a cocky pick given the needs on the team. But when the Bears get good, I mean, punters play for a long time. He's going to be a solid guy to have, but I mean, surely we had bigger needs during this draft. So I get it. So let's get into the coaching here, Jacob. So we have had 16 names revealed. Thank God the Dallas Cowboys denied our opportunity to interview Mike McCarthy. Thank you very much, Jerry Jones. I really, really appreciate that. But that leaves, as of my last check a couple of hours ago, unless anything is broken, since we have 6 confirmed interviews, and then we have another 9 requested interviews.
Yeah.
And man, it is quite a list. I mean, one of them that broke today was Matt Campbell, the head coach of Iowa State.
Yeah.
And look, he's a solid coach. I live in Iowa. I'm not a Cyclones fan. I just got to say, Jacob, a coach from Iowa State coming to Chicago just I mean, there's some bad history there. I don't want
Yeah.
to see that happen. I don't think it's going to happen, but
Yeah.
he's a smart guy. They can
Yeah.
talk to him. But I mean, the list in general, and we've talked about it on the show in the last few weeks. I think we're all pretty much in alignment on the guys that we want.
Mm-hmm.
There was the quote about how some of their picks were going to surprise us, and I mean, I'm like, I don't know if I really want these interviews to surprise me, because I don't want them to do something stupid. I think the direction should be fairly obvious here.
Yeah.
I mean, just give me your thoughts, however you want to take this discussion on the list of coaches and where you think we're headed here.
Yeah. So I'm not going to beat around the bush. I think it should be Ben Johnson. I'm sure a lot of people agree with that. And for, good reason. The Lions offense has been tremendous. He's proven to be one of the best play callers in the NFL for the last 2.5 years. Especially if the Lions make a deep playoff run, you're looking at potentially 2 appearances in the NFC Championship, maybe an appearance in the Super Bowl, leading that offense in a tremendous fashion, doing a great job of scheming guys open, doing a great job of, like the trick plays are there, and that's going to get all like the headlines and everything. But I think even more than that is just his ability to adapt, the ability to keep a defense guessing. Like going back watching that Vikings game, I think Brian Flores is one of the best defensive minds in football right now. And as a defensive coordinator, not as a head coaching candidate, I'll say, but as a defensive coordinator, I don't know if you can do better than Flores right now. And watching the way that Ben Johnson managed that, watching the way that Jared Goff still knew what progressions to make, still knew who to hit, even with all of the pre-snap movement that Minnesota had. The game plan was still strong. They still executed fairly well. I think it should be Ben Johnson, but you're right. I think that I didn't necessarily love that some of these names are going to surprise you. It's like that again, maybe they're going to hire the guy that a lot of us want. Maybe it's going to be Ben Johnson. Maybe I know a lot of people like Mike Vrabel as well. Maybe it's going to be someone like that, but I really don't want it to be some sort of, oh, I didn't see that one coming. I feel like
CFL coach.
Exactly. I keep coming back to they chose Mark Trestman over Bruce Arians.
Right.
And that just reeked of we want to be the smartest guys in the room. So everyone's like, no, we didn't see that coming, but genius Phil Emery did. Genius George McCaskey did. So I don't want that to be the case because it's pretty cut and dry to me. I think like I've been on the record for saying that I think Ben Johnson's the best first-time head coaching candidate to hit the market since Kyle Shanahan when he was the offensive coordinator and the play caller for that Falcons team that made it to the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And the 49ers have turned into, I mean, this year was injuries, it hurt them pretty badly, but when those guys are healthy, they're one of the best teams in the NFL. And I think Ben Johnson has the potential to be have a similar impact. So he's the guy I want. There are other picks where I'm going to be like, okay with it. Like I think it was Joe Brady who got a request. Liam Cohen hasn't been requested yet. He's someone I'd like to see them at least talk to. Vrabel, I know his interview went down today. I don't love a defensive-minded head coach, but if they go in that direction, Vrabel's my top choice.
Mm-hmm.
I think he really overachieved with some of those Titans rosters that he had, especially early on in that tenure. But yeah, I can go on and on about it. I really think it should be Ben Johnson. If they have the opportunity, they should, I think it's a more attractive job than Jacksonville. I think if the Patriots do go Mike Vrabel, that makes things a lot easier because I think the Patriots are the only opening right now that you can really debate might be as good or better than the Bears. But yeah, that's where my thoughts lie on it. I'm curious what you think too, because I don't know. I feel like a lot of people are in agreement about where exactly they want this to end up.
Yeah, no, I like the parallel with Shanahan you drew with Johnson. I think Ben Johnson, just what he has done in Detroit and what he's done and just totally changing the trajectory of Jared Goff's career.
Yeah.
I would be very confident in him coming in here to work with a second-year quarterback, and I also think the guy just has a lot of cachet right now around the league that he should be able to assemble a solid coaching staff around him. I think
Yeah.
he'll bring in a good defensive coordinator. I think his positional coaches will be great. I think people will really want to work with him. It's not like when you bring in one of these guys totally out of nowhere and it's hard maybe to get top talent around them in the coaching staff. And I talked about Chris Morgan earlier. Like we have seen some Bears coaching staffs that really lacked with the positional coaches and the
Yeah.
coordinators. And I don't think that will be an issue. So, I mean, we've all kind of been on board with the Ben Johnson train. I think they should do whatever they can to land him. There's a couple of others that I could probably be sold on if they don't get him. When the Raiders fired their coach, I had running through my mind that what if they get Vrabel and then Johnson goes to the Pats, then where are we at? And, that's like my worst nightmare that could happen. Yeah, I could probably be sold on Vrabel. I mean, he's not, I don't want him as much as Johnson, but I understand why they would bring him in.
Yeah.
When we started hearing about Pete Carroll, like I wasn't excited about that either. Like an older coach like that, it really just kind of screamed like a John Fox hire to me.
Yeah. Like a
I'm not
transitional.
saying, yeah, because I want a young guy in here that's going to be around for the long haul. I mean, you just look around our division and like in the NFC North, we've got 3 of the best coaches in the entire league, and it's going to be so hard for us to be competitive if we don't nail this. So I don't really want to get an older guy in here. It's going to be around for 5 years or less, and then we're screwed. Probably, I mean, 5 years would be pushing with a Pete Carroll. So I mean, I could understand like you think he's going to bring stability. He's had a lot of success at different levels. And like maybe they could sway me, but like that's not where I want to go. I look around the NFC North and I see a guy like Kevin O'Connell, who I think is in the argument as one of the absolute best coaches in the NFL, given what he's done with that team this year. To me, he should be the NFL coach of the year. Nobody expected this out of Minnesota. That guy is brilliant. And that was a hell of a hire too, because when they got him, you can say everything you want about the Bears not even interviewing him. And, those people that make those decisions are paid way more than we are, Jacob. So they should have known. But like just us, like nobody was really talking about him,
Yeah.
as a big time candidate that year. And man, they found a guy. He is brilliant. I am very jealous of what they have up there. And then, obviously with LaFleur, he's a great coach too. Campbell. I mean, we have got to get a young coach in here that's a bit of a whiz kid, and I think Ben Johnson is that. And so that's why I go down, that lane. Aaron Glenn, he's pretty impressive too. I mean, going off the Lions tree again. I mean, I could probably get behind that, but I just feel pretty solidly that they need to get an offensive guy in here. I don't really want to see him go defense at all.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you there. I think that, to like kind of echo the same sentiment, like going for an older coach, I feel like that makes sense if you have an established quarterback. I think the Bruce Arians, Tom Brady pairing in Tampa Bay was perfect because you don't need to teach Tom Brady much of anything. You don't need Tom Brady's not going to develop at 43. But you have a good, experienced coach who knows how to win games, who knows how to get the most out of other young guys around him. And then, that sort of a hire makes sense. But with, an older coach where realistically they're only going to be there for, like you said, less than 5 years, it's all right, cool. We're going to be doing this again in, 3-4 years, maybe. It's the same, is the same exact thing. It's just, I don't know. There's not as much upside with it. So, and I think with Vrabel is definitely a floor raiser. I think the floor with the Bears becomes significantly higher. I'd argue it becomes higher than maybe any other head coaching candidate, but the ceiling is absolutely the highest with Ben Johnson. I believe that 100%. And I've, we're in agreement. Like we've seen enough from what he's been able to do with his Lions team, how he's turned Jared Goff around to be able to propel this franchise to where it needs to go. Part of that's going to have to come down to, all right, you're going to have to invest in an offensive line in the way that the Lions have invested in an offensive line. I mean, they've had they had Taylor Decker as a stalwart there. They had Frank Ragnow as a stalwart there. They added Penei Sewell. They added Kevin Zeitler. He's been in the league for ages. I don't know if it's Zeitler, whatever. I don't know. But the offensive line, that's been a priority in Detroit. And I think that Poles needs to be in lockstep. If they do hire Ben Johnson, if they hire whoever they hire, the offensive line needs to be a priority. But I think that the best way for Johnson to succeed is to put him in as similar of a situation as what he had in Detroit. And I mean, look, you're not going to be able to have David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs grow those on trees. But you can have a really good receiver duo in DJ Moore and Roma Dunze. You can have a really good tight end if you use him properly in Cole Kmet. You have some pieces on the offensive line. You're definitely going to need to spend more, maybe need to find another running back too. But it's not like the cupboard's completely bare. There's stuff to work with. And I think that maybe not in year one, but potentially in year two, you could get to that point where it's like, all right, this is a loaded offense. Mm-hmm. So it's going to take time. This isn't a 1 year fix everything, I don't think, but I think you can definitely make a lot of progress in 2025.
To me, one of the biggest selling points, and given what we've seen this year and the failings of the Bears head coaching staff, is, a lack of attention to the details.
Yeah.
With whether it's clock management or just the lineups, the play calling. And we know that would not be an issue with Ben Johnson. I mean, you just hear his players talk about it. There was a quote I saw today from Amon-Ra St. Brown where he was talking about how the guy is so detailed, yet makes it so easy to understand. I wish I had the quote in front of me. It was just today I saw it out there. And that's exactly what they need. They need one of these guys who's so thorough, that has it figured out. Of course, there's going to be a learning curve being a head coach. It's not the same as what he's been doing. But, also this isn't like when they hired Matt Nagy and he was coming in with limited play calling experience. This is a guy who's been running the show. And he's got the best offense in the league, and he's created that, he's molded that. And again, the Shanahan comparison was a great comp by you. I feel very confident. I know some people feel like we need a guy who's been a head coach before, but I think this is different here with this guy, just because of the success we've seen out of his unit in Detroit. There was a lot of chatter today on social media about, the news that the Bears were doing all these interviews virtual. And, some of the beat reporters were just aghast that the Bears would do these virtual, and they weren't bringing them all to Hallis Hall for this first interview. Yeah. And other people, like our boss here, Lester at Winning City Gridiron, he was like, no, this is ridiculous that people are making a big deal about this. How do you feel about the virtual interviews, Jacob?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's some of them where, it's like you have to do them virtual just because of the rules. I know Ben Johnson isn't allowed to, interview like on site this week. Just,
it's January 20th, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. Cause the Lions are still in the playoffs, but, or whatever the case is, but I don't know. I really don't care. I think as long as you can, I think like as someone who, full-time, I work in like technology services and staffing, right? And not to get all, let me pull up the glasses on you, but you can do a pretty good job of, if you know what to look for, of screening candidates, screening their intelligence, their character, their fit for a potential role by speaking to them virtually. I think there's something that can absolutely be gauged from that. So, obviously, if for something like a head coach, you do want them to appear at Hallis Hall, you want to meet them in person, before you make that decision. Exactly. But I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think it's anything worth debating about. It wasn't anything I was going to like comment about. I wasn't going to tweet about it or anything. But, again, since you mention it, I don't think it's a big deal. I don't know what, Yeah.
No, I don't think so either. I think it's common sense, especially given how many people they're interviewing. But yeah, I think you bring the cream of the crop to Hallis Hall when they get down to making that final decision. Of course they're going to do that. So, as they're weeding out the candidates, I have no problem. This is 2025. We're not hiring a coach here back in the 80s or 90s. I think this is fine to do it that way. And they'll talk to some guys, they'll get some insight about their team, which I think is part of the purpose with some of these people that they're interviewing, just to see what people think about the team. I think some of these names they're probably not really fully considering, but maybe they want to hear what they have to say. Maybe they'll blow them away. But I mean, I think and this gets to another criticism that they didn't even want to talk to Belichick. But I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with talking to a lot of people and seeing what people think about your team. And, everybody thinks in different ways. You can gain some insight about your team as the GM just from what some of these candidates say around the league. And so, I mean, that's what they're doing. They'll bring them all in. We'll make that coaching hire and we'll be here to talk about it on Bears Over Beers whenever it happens. So stay tuned.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I know it's fun. It's a fun time of year to speculate. I think that's, the best thing that us Bears fans can do right now is speculate, imagine what if, what could happen. Part of that is because the on the field results haven't been great for some time now, but I mean, at the same time, it's always fun to think what if. It's always fun to look towards the future. So it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. I hope that we get the chance to break down a head coach and feel good about it. I hope it's Ben Johnson especially, but I hope just in general, I can come away from this Bears hire and be like, all right, yeah, I feel confident in the direction of the franchise. So will it happen? I don't know, but that's, it's fun to speculate. It's fun to speculate.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to break it all down with you once we get it all sorted out.
I found that quote from Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I want to talk about it. So I can't remember who the interview was with, but Amon-Ra St. Brown says about Ben Johnson, quote, the way he's explaining the plays, the way he's detailed with how we've got to run these routes in the red zone, I just knew the way he was talking to us, it just felt different. I told one of my teammates, I forgot who it was, I was like, bro, when Ben gets up there, he knows exactly what he's talking about. He's telling us what he sees in this play, what he wants us to do. There's no gray area. It's super detailed. So he's detail oriented, but he has command of the offense. It sounds like these guys respect him quite a bit.
Yeah.
When we talk about leader of men, I mean, like, it sounds like he is,
Yeah.
We'll find out. But I feel very confident if that's the hire they make. I hope that they make it happen. I hope they're not cheap on the contract offer. I hope when they bring him to Hallis Hall, he's not flying coach. And I hope they do this thing right, Jacob. But yeah, we'll be here to break it all down whenever it happens. At some point in the next month or so, we'll be back with another Bears Over Beers. So make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel. Make sure you got those bell notifications on, or if you're on the podcast feed, make sure you're subscribed here. 2 Second City Gridiron. Leave us that 5-star rating. That helps us out in the podcast apps as well. We would really appreciate that. We got all kinds of shows going up all the time. From Bill Zimmerman's got a great one coming here that I'm looking forward to as a listener. So make sure you check the feed here in the next 24 to 48 hours for that one. Of course, we got Lester and JB. We got Mason West. We got Taylor Dow. We have a great crew here on Second City Gridiron to keep you company during the long off-season months, you guys. So stay tuned. Jacob, I'll be looking forward to talking to you next time. Tell the listeners where they can find you on social.
Yeah, no, of course. So you guys can find me on Twitter, X at JacobInfante24. All my written work over at Windy City Gridiron, as well as now as Pro Football Network. Occasionally I do, I give or take 2-3 articles a month or so over there now too. So that's something I'm excited about, just covering the NFL draft, getting more opportunities to, talk about my favorite part of the football year. You can check out my Patreon. That's just patreon.com/JacobInfante. And yeah, that's where you guys can find me. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk Bears, regardless of whether the team's good. So, I'm grateful to be here chatting it up with you, and I'm excited, whenever it's going to be this offseason to do it again.
Absolutely. Can't wait to see the direction of this team and give us some more fodder for these podcasts. Absolutely. You guys can find me on social too at Ryan Droste. It's DROSTE. X, Blue Sky, Instagram, all the places. Find me there. You can check out Top Rope Nation, my other podcast, if you like pro wrestling. I cover pro wrestling in addition to the Chicago Bears, so check that out as well if you like that kind of thing. And I will be back here with you guys next time as well. So whenever that is, we'll be talking to you. Enjoy the rest of your week, everybody, and we'll talk to you real soon. Go Bears.